I'm happily settled in life, having married into a prosperous and loving family. My days are filled with contentment, a stark contrast to the moment when Mason, my ex-husband, mockingly commented on what he perceived as my simple lifestyle. We were sitting in the elegant lobby of a luxurious hotel, the kind with plush armchairs and a soft hum of sophistication, when his sharp, cutting voice pierced through my calm. He taunted me with his latest life update, boasting proudly about his new wife. She was, as he put it, none other than the daughter of the president of Goldsmith Enterprises. His laughter, tinged with an almost smug pride, echoed through the air. But it was the mention of Goldsmith Enterprises that caught my attention, like a faint bell ringing in the back of my mind. I knew that name, though I couldn't quite place it at first. Then, like a puzzle piece snapping into place, it clicked. Mason, oblivious to the irony I found in his gloating, continued to revel in his supposed triumph. My name is Patricia, and I'm 37 years old, living a fulfilling life with my current husband. I work in my family's thriving real estate business, handling critical administrative duties that keep the company running smoothly. My father, the president of our enterprise, oversees the major strategies, guiding the business with his decades of experience. As an only child, I'm expected to one day take the reins and lead the company myself. It's a daunting responsibility, but one I've been preparing for my entire career. Despite the weight of that future, I strive to maintain a careful balance between my personal and professional life, especially when it comes to navigating relationships. Mason, my ex-husband, completed high school and works for a moving company, a physically demanding job that I deeply respect. To avoid making him feel inadequate during our marriage, I rarely mentioned my university degree or my anticipated role as president of the company. It was a delicate dance, one I thought would preserve harmony. Mason and I met through a mutual friend during my college years. She had hired his moving company for a relocation, and after the job was done, she introduced us. Initially, Mason was interested in her, but when she turned him down, we began to connect. His easygoing, carefree nature complemented my meticulous, detail-oriented personality, and our relationship blossomed quickly. We married in our late 20s after a brief but passionate courtship. Our marriage was smooth at first, bolstered by the warm, welcoming embrace of Mason's parents, a refreshing contrast to the in-law challenges some of my friends faced. Despite his demanding job, which often kept him out until late, leaving him physically exhausted, Mason remained committed to our marriage. Even on his toughest days, he'd express gratitude when I waited up to share a quiet dinner with him. I felt fortunate to have such a devoted husband, and for a time, our life together seemed perfect. But after just 1 year of marriage, cracks began to appear in our peaceful existence. One night, as we settled into bed, Mason unexpectedly brought up the topic of having children. His tone was sharp, tinged with irritation, catching me completely off guard. I had thought about starting a family too, and though we weren't actively trying, I believed it would happen naturally when the time was right. "It's only been a year, Mason," I reassured him gently. "There's no rush." I wanted children, but I knew stressing about it wouldn't help. To ease the tension, I adopted a calm, relaxed demeanor, hoping to diffuse the situation. But Mason, more assertive than I'd ever seen him, quoted statistics with surprising confidence. "You know, there's about a 90% chance of conceiving within a year for couples not using contraception," he said, his voice firm. I wasn't well-versed in such specifics, and that figure sounded surprisingly high to me. "If you're concerned, maybe we should both get tested," I suggested, thinking it was a sensible, collaborative approach to address any potential issues. To my shock, Mason's reaction was harsh and unexpected. "What are you implying? That it's my fault?" "Usually, it's the woman's fault," he retorted, his tone dripping with contempt. It was the first time he'd ever spoken to me with such venom. I hadn't accused him of anything. I had simply proposed a joint effort to find clarity. Yet, Mason doubled down, concluding I was blaming him. It's definitely the woman's fault, he added, as if to drive home that I was the problem. I wanted to respond, to defend myself, but I was too shaken, barely managing to reply, of course, so just you get tested. I'm too busy with work. His response was a cruel jab. I have a job too, you know. You're just coasting along in your dad's company, he snapped. His words stung deeply. I never coasted. Though my role involved administrative tasks, I was actively learning management skills from my father, preparing to lead our family's company someday. That night, any attempt at discussion was met with curt replies, and we fell asleep with our backs turned, a heavy, suffocating silence hanging between us. From that moment on, Mason's attitude toward me shifted drastically. One evening, after a long discussion about the company's future with my father, I returned home late. Mason was visibly irritated that dinner wasn't ready. I'm sorry, I just got home 15 minutes ago, I explained hurriedly. I'll start cooking now. Just wait a little, please. But Mason dismissed my apology with a sneer. That's typical of a small company's boss's daughter, he said, oblivious to the scale of my father's business, a significant real estate empire with hundreds of employees. His assumptions, coupled with his growing bitterness, made navigating our daily life increasingly challenging. What had once been a loving, supportive relationship was now overshadowed by tension and resentment. Arguing felt pointless, so I hurried to the kitchen, promising to cook immediately. Have a drink and relax while you wait, I suggested, knowing alcohol seemed to soothe him. It saddened me that our relationship had come to rely on his evening drinks to avoid conflict. I despised being scolded, but if it helped keep the peace, even temporarily, I reluctantly saw it as a necessary evil. The next day, Mason's cold demeanor lingered as he left for work, his parting words sharp and cutting. Make sure dinner's ready when I get home, he said. I exhaled deeply, my mind already shifting to the day ahead. I had scheduled a day off to visit a gynecologist for fertility testing, something Mason had insisted on, though he refused to participate himself. It was frustrating to go through this alone, but complaining wouldn't change anything. If the problem lay with me, I wanted to start treatment immediately, knowing fertility could decline with age. The clinic was crowded, and I waited an hour before my examination. After a series of tests, the doctor informed me the results would be available at my next appointment. The possibility that I might be the one with fertility issues was daunting, but I was prepared to take whatever steps were necessary. When Mason returned home that evening, I told him I went for the fertility test today. His response was cold and dismissive. Figures. If the problem's with you, it's good you're getting tested. Let me know the results. His assumption that I was to blame for our difficulties in conceiving was deeply hurtful. 6 years passed, and I turned 37. Our attempts to have a child continued without success, and Mason seemed to resign himself to never becoming a father. His late nights became more frequent, and sometimes he didn't come home at all. When he did, he'd claim he was out drinking and singing karaoke until dawn. His behavior reminded me of a carefree college student, not the committed husband I once knew, and it was incredibly frustrating. My work had become more demanding, forcing me to sideline the dream of starting a family. But Mason's recent actions were becoming intolerable, his disregard for our life together painfully obvious. One day, after Mason left the house on his day off, I noticed he had forgotten his smartphone in the living room. I picked it up, intending to place it in his room, when it rang. The caller ID displayed a name, Diana. Assuming she was a colleague, I answered to let her know Mason had left his phone at home. Hey, Mason, you're late, a flirtatious voice exclaimed. I've been waiting for 50 minutes. Hurry up, or we'll miss the park opening. We haven't had a date in so long. The mention of a date stunned me, and I quickly hung up, my heart racing. This woman wasn't just a colleague, she was someone Mason was seeing romantically. Holding his phone, proof of his infidelity clenched in my hand, I felt a mix of shock and anger. While I struggled with potential infertility, Mason had been carelessly engaging in an affair. His recent distance suddenly made sense, and I stood there, trembling with indescribable anger at his betrayal. Realizing he no longer needed me in his life was a devastating blow, but discovering his infidelity made the situation utterly unbearable. Determined to confront the issue head-on, I began gathering evidence of his infidelity. Unlocking his smartphone using his birth date was effortless. The call history and messages were dominated by exchanges with Diana, filled with affectionate, intimate words that turned my stomach. I meticulously documented everything, taking photos with my phone before returning his device to its usual spot, acting as if nothing had changed. A month passed in this eerie state of our fractured marriage until one day, my father, the president of our company, called me into his office. "I have something important to discuss with you," he said solemnly. His grave tone caught me off guard, and I braced myself for serious news, which only compounded the stress I was already feeling. That evening, perhaps sensing the inevitable, Mason suggested we consider separating. I was already contemplating how to address the divorce given his infidelity, so his initiation was unexpectedly convenient. "Yes, let's divorce," I agreed quickly. Mason seemed taken aback by my readiness, possibly hopeful about his future with Diana. Despite the sting of seeing his relief, I signed the divorce papers he presented. "I can file these tomorrow." "I'll be leaving this house," he said nonchalantly. "Are you sure about the mortgage?" I asked casually, suspecting he hadn't fully considered his financial situation without me. His job was demanding but not lucrative, and I doubted his ability to manage the mortgage payments on his own. Nevertheless, he was confident, or perhaps just naive. Given his betrayal, I felt no obligation to ease his transition. I moved back to my parents' house a few days later. They were initially worried about my well-being but became furious when I explained Mason's infidelity. They supported my decision to leave him, reassuring me repeatedly that parting ways was the best course of action. Throwing myself into work, I tried to move past the emotional turmoil of my failed marriage. A year flew by in a blur of commitments and projects. One evening, seeing how engrossed and tired I had become, my father suggested a break. "Why don't you take a trip?" "It's going to get busy starting next month," he advised, his voice filled with concern for my well-being. Grateful for the suggestion and feeling mentally exhausted, I decided to take a solo trip to the Northeast, craving a change of scenery and some much-needed peace. The air in the Northeast was crisp and refreshing, seeming to cleanse my weary soul. I interacted with locals who were incredibly kind and helpful, gradually M-pager, 5 ending my spirit. I booked a stay in Los Angeles at a renowned hotel, deciding to indulge in the best experience possible. After checking in, I relaxed in the lobby with a welcome drink, the fatigue from my journey melting away. I felt so at peace that I half-joked to myself about moving to Los Angeles permanently. Just then, a familiar voice pierced through the calm. "Huh? Hey, what are you doing here?" I turned, startled, to find Mason entering the lobby with 2 large suitcases. The unexpected encounter with my ex-husband was the last thing I anticipated on this healing journey. Surrounded by the elegant charm of the Los Angeles hotel lobby, I felt a sudden jolt of reality as I spotted Mason entering with a young woman on his arm. She looked to be in her early 20s, with flawless skin, bold makeup, and striking red nails that contrasted sharply against the chilly northeastern weather. Her attire was bold too, a short skirt despite the cold. My eyes locked onto them in disbelief. "Why are you here, and who is she?" I couldn't help but blurt out, my curiosity overpowering my doubts about wanting the answers. "Oh, let me introduce you," Mason said with a hint of excitement I hadn't seen in a long time. "This is Diana, my new wife. We're on our honeymoon, and guess what? She's the daughter of a wealthy businessman." The name Diana hit me like a wave. She was the same Diana from the phone call months ago. I felt a surge of discomfort at his obvious pride in marrying someone so much younger and wealthily connected. "You're here alone?" That's sad, Mason sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. Beside him, Diana eyed me with a smirk. Hey, Mason, is this your ex-wife? She looks old. Hurry up with the check-in, she said, her tone sharp and irritated. I managed to keep my composure as Mason nonchalantly draped an arm around her, boasting, Yeah, I'm set for life now, marrying into money. You keep struggling in your modest life. His high-pitched laugh cut through the serene atmosphere of the lobby, a stark contrast to the tranquility I had been enjoying. He continued to flaunt his new life. Yeah, Diana is Goldsmith's daughter. You know, Goldsmith Enterprises, he added, seeming overly proud. The mention of Goldsmith Enterprises rang a bell. I recalled it just as Mason's face lit up with childlike glee. Impressive, huh? Her family's loaded. They even paid off our house mortgage quickly. Thanks for making the divorce easy, Patricia, he said sarcastically. Yeah, I know them. They're in that big building downtown, right? I've been there, I replied calmly, barely fazed by his remarks. Mason looked surprised. Oh, you've been there? Well, her family owns a huge company, so breaking up with you was the right choice, he smirked maliciously. I nodded, still calm. That building? It's part of our real estate holdings, I mentioned casually, as if recalling a minor detail. What do you mean, our real estate? Mason and Diana chimed in together, both perplexed. That building is rented by my father for his most prestigious office. I'm not sure if your company is involved in real estate, but it's certainly not a shabby building, I explained with a serene tone. Their skepticism was palpable. I paused, knowing there was no turning back. Yes, I know how grand it is. I was there when my father purchased that building for about $500 million recently. He was complaining about a tenant not paying their rent. Turns out, it was your company. In fact, my father is a real estate magnate with assets worth $5 billion, and that building is one of them. Goldsmith Enterprises has been the tenant for the past few months, and they haven't paid their rent, I revealed, watching their reactions closely. Diana burst out laughing, disbelief written all over her face. That can't be true. Our company's doing great, she claimed, still laughing, but the shock in her eyes told a different story. Despite the shock of seeing Mason with his new wife, I was determined not to be drawn into their drama. Yet Diana's loud claims that their company could surely pay the rent echoed around us, hinting at denial or deceit. Her tone was dismissive, suggesting I was lying just to create discord between her and Mason. Realizing a simple conversation wouldn't suffice, I pulled out my smartphone right there in the hotel lobby. I'm here with the daughter of Goldsmith Enterprises, I told my dad over the phone. Can you send me a photo of the rent reminder notice? Within moments, my father sent a clear image of the notice addressed to Goldsmith Enterprises, showing 4 months of unpaid rent. I showed the image to Mason and Diana, doubting they could dismiss it as fake given the immediate proof. See, if you don't pay soon, we might have to consider legal action. What are you going to do? I asked calmly. Diana's confidence wavered as she mumbled, come to think of it, Dad has been stressed lately, talking about slow sales and firing a lot of employees. Mason, however, seemed to spiral into denial, accusing me of fabricating the story to split them up. You're just trying to trick us and tear us apart, aren't you? You're still that kind of person, trying to get back at me for remarrying. Your tactics are dirty, he shouted, causing me to step back, shocked by his loud, accusing voice. His words brought back painful memories of our marriage, of all the harsh things he had said when things got tough between us. But now, standing here, I was no longer the person who took his words silently. What are you even saying, Mason? Do you really think I still have feelings for you? How foolish. I've long been over a man like you. In fact, I feel sorry for Diana. Getting caught up with someone like you, I said, my voice steady but firm. Did you marry her just for her money? You had shallow reasons for marrying me too, like wanting to get married quickly and wanting kids. And who was it that left me when he found out we couldn't have kids? Who called me useless for being infertile? You're to blame for all of it, yet you think I still have feelings for you? You must be out of your mind. Mason's face turned red with anger. You're just an arrogant old hag. You probably can't even get married or have kids anymore. Diana and I are planning to have fun making a baby after this trip, he retorted, his voice thick with desperation. It was then I decided to reveal the truth to finally put an end to his assumptions. Oh, I didn't mention it, but I'm 5 months pregnant. I'm in the stable phase of my pregnancy, so my dad suggested I take this trip to relax, I revealed calmly. That's right. After our divorce, I found someone who truly supports me, my boss at work, who happens to be a subordinate of my father. He has been a great support, both personally and professionally. I found out I was pregnant just 5 months ago. It was a quick marriage, but my company and my father celebrated it grandly. Mason's face fell, his earlier bravado evaporating as he processed the news. You're pregnant? So, were you using birth control? The question was absurd, and I couldn't help but feel a mixture of pity and relief as I looked at him. My life had moved on from the chaos he brought into it. Now, more than ever, I was sure of my path forward, strengthened by the support of my new husband and the imminent responsibility of leading my father's company, especially as he planned to retire soon due to health reasons. My future, though once intertwined with Mason's, was now firmly my own, filled with new beginnings and free from his shadow. Mason's confusion was palpable as he stomped his feet, bewildered by the revelation. Birth control? I never did that. Remember, I told you I had infertility tests at the clinic, and they found no issues, so the problem wasn't just with me, I said, my words blunt and to the point. His face contorted with the realization. Does that mean Diana and I can't have kids? Why did I divorce you to marry Diana? He muttered to himself, his shoulders slumping in defeat. What do you mean, why? You felt betrayed knowing he was infertile. Diana snapped back, her anger flaring at Mason's self-centered logic. Realizing I had no reason to engage further, I delivered my final statement. That's why, from now on, please keep your affairs separate from mine. Regarding the rent for Goldsmith Enterprises, I expect full payment if you intend to continue leasing the building. Please settle the overdue rent soon. Otherwise, we'll need to pursue legal action. I have nothing more to say to you. Goodbye. With that, I left Mason and Diana in mid-argument and confidently returned to my hotel room. Upon my return from the trip, my husband greeted me with a warm, genuine smile. Welcome back, Patricia. Sorry I couldn't help around the house. Was everything okay? He asked, his voice filled with care. Of course, it was fine. I'm just glad you got to relax, he added, his smile comforting. Since marrying my current husband, I've felt reassured daily, and thoughts of Mason have faded into the background. After that incident, I didn't see Mason again, but through my father's contacts, I learned that Mason and Diana's situation had worsened. Despite his initial belief that he was marrying into wealth, Mason discovered that Goldsmith Enterprises was steeped in debt. News had spread across TV channels about an employee at Goldsmith Enterprises embezzling millions from clients. Diana's father had known about the fraud, but attempted to cover it up to protect the company's reputation. However, once the scandal became public, Goldsmith Enterprises' stock plummeted, and the company lost its credibility. A mass exodus of employees followed. In such a dire state, it was clear they couldn't possibly cover their rent, let alone recover from the scandal. This turn of events reaffirmed my relief in having moved on from that chapter of my life. As I focused on a future filled with stability, genuine affection, and the joy of impending motherhood with my new husband, I felt a profound sense of peace. My career was thriving, my family was growing, and I was ready to step into my role as a leader in my father's company. The past, with all its pain and betrayal, was behind me, and I was ready to embrace the bright, promising future ahead.